Hello and welcome. I am your host, former President of the United States and demolition expert, George W. Bush.
Now watch this drive.
Today I'm proud to announce the start of a new series to kick off this channel. We will be going through the history of the Roman Empire, starting in the 700s BC, all the way to the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD. I will be chronicling the Roman peoples and perspectives through the lens of their craftiness, their adaptabilities, and their indomitable spirit and will, from being a backwater city-state to masters of the Mediterranean. So without further introduction, welcome to Redneck Romans.
He who are about to die, salute you!
I remember syrup sandwiches and crime allowances, finesse the dude with some counterfeit, but now I'm counting. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. My left hook just went viral. Guilty!
Before we get to the founding of Rome, we have to do some prehistory with Virgil's The Aeneid. And to do that, I've brought in my dishwasher to help discuss Virgil's The Aeneid.
Hello there. So the Aeneid was written by Virgil in 29 to 19 BC. It was written in the style of a Homeric epic. Virgil was a huge Homer fanboy and actually pulled the Aeneid from the Iliad. It was sort of meant to restore faith in Rome itself. The Republic had just fallen, the empire was getting built, and people weren't entirely sure about where they stood as Roman citizens. The morale really needed to be boosted. So Virgil wrote the Aeneid. After Troy falls, one guy miraculously survives. It's Aeneas. He is a Trojan prince. He is the son of Venus. Virgil will repeat this non-stop just to make sure that you know that this is a divine story. He escapes the burning city with his dad on his back, his kid in his hand, and essentially immediately sets out on what is a divinely mandated road trip. On the way, the gods are both helping him and ruining his life just because he is destined to found Rome. He hooks up with Queen Dido in Carthage and accidentally dooms her entire emotional well-being, as men do, and leaves because destiny says so. And eventually, he lands in Italy, fights a few local wars, marries the right bloodline, and has his descendants go on to found Rome. In short, he survived Troy, outlasted the gods' nonsense, and kickstarted the Roman civilization because he had the power of the gods and anime on his side.
Is that me? Is that me stronger than me? I'll f***ing kill me!
Sorry about that, I had to put a load in my dishwasher. So the founding of Rome started like any ancient story. A god fucks a woman. The god of war, Mars, fucks a king's wife and begets 2 twin boys. The king, in retaliation, sends these 2 boys in a basket down the river to their doom. And to be fair, who wouldn't crash out if he got cucked by a planet? The twins, Remus and Romulus, came ashore on the bank of a river and were saved by a female wolf with absolute mommy milkers. They were later raised by a shepherd who happened to find them. Once they were adults, they got revenge on the king and killed him and took his land to create their own kingdom. Brother, we have our own kingdom and it will live eternally. I agree. This is the start of something amazing. Our city, Rome. I just love the name Romulus. It just sounds right. I mean, can you imagine if we named it after you? It sounds fucking stupid. Rome.
Say that again?
So Romulus founded this city, much to our delight and his brother's detriment. He's the one who established the Senate, created a body of laws, and drafted the first army. But Romulus looked around and noticed that his kingdom was a total sausage party. His kingdom was made out of outcasts and hillbillies of the neighboring kingdoms. And they were leaving dishes everywhere. So he came up with a plan to take his neighbors' dishwashers to secure the city's future. He invited the Sabines to a party in honor of Neptune and got them absolutely shit-faced. While they were sloshed, the Romans came for the Sabine dishwashers and then came again.
Yeah, boy.
When the Sabine men woke up and realized what had happened, it looked like war was inevitable between these two people. However, the Sabine dishwashers pleaded with their fathers and ex-husbands for peace between the two people, considering they were carrying the next generation for both. So the Sabines and Romans entered an uneasy peace and decided to trade off the crown with the death of the last. Speaking of that, Romulus ruled for 30 plus years, but then was taken away in a storm to do keg stands with his father. Before we talk about Romulus' successors, I'd like to talk briefly about the Roman class system, as it won't be changed for centuries at this point. The patricians were at the top and made all the decisions and dominated the Senate. Below them were plebs, artisans, merchants, common proto-peasants, pretty much everyone else. And below them were actors, where they belong. And even below them were slaves.
Day is never finished. Master got me working. Someday Master set me free.
The next king was a Sabine named Numa Popilius, who was all about the gods, a religious fanatic and nutjob. He is the one mostly remembered for creating all the temples and cults and religious rituals for all the gods and the worship. Pretty cool king, kind of a pussy. After Numa, a Roman named Tullus Hostilius was elected king. To be clear, Roman kings were never inherited the crown, they were elected. So what would happen is the Senate would elect one of their own to be an interrex, or a middle king, and that middle king would choose someone who was worthy of the position. Anyways, Tullus Hostilius was hell-bent on bringing Rome back to its martial roots and taking some territory from the neighbors. He didn't want the Roman people to grow weak as they did under Numa. So,
It is a beautiful day to fuck shit up.
he famously defeated the Alba Longa in a wars that ended up with their subjugation for the crime of having a stupid fucking name. After Hostilius was Incus Marius, the grandson of Numa, and a bit of both between Numa and Hostilius. He founded more temples and tweaked the rites and everything, gave to the plebs and whatnot. And he also kicked the Latins' ass as they were starting some shit. He was also the first to build a bridge over the river Tiber and created the first colony, which is the port city of Ostia that lies close to Rome itself. After him was an upgrade by the name of Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, a man of Etruscan origin, who rose through the ranks to win the throne. Priscus expanded the Senate and gave generously to the plebs. He fought against the Latins, Sabines, and Etruscans and wiped the floor with all of them. He also built the Circus Maximus in order for his people to party and gamble on the gladiators. He's also the first Roman general to receive a triumph. Now, a triumph is when a major general usually adds territory or conquers a certain people. He would come back to the city riding a chariot and with all his gold and plunder behind him, basically saying,
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
So the sons of the last king, Incus Marius, were super jealous and they wanted the throne for themselves. So they orchestrated a riot in which Priscus was assassinated. Unfortunately for them, Priscus had a very smart and very loyal dishwasher named Tanquilla. Now she, before Priscus's death, named a regent in order to secure the throne. The regent happened to be her son-in-law, but that's neither here nor there. This regent, who became the 6th king of Rome, was Servius Tullius, and he got to work defeating the Etruscans. Again. He also gave plebs a voice in the decision-making process, albeit a microscopic one. He also created the first census for the city, assessing all the property and wealth of all its citizens. All in all, Servius was a serviceable king. But he had a daughter, a young daughter named Tullia the Younger, and she was married to the son of Priscus. And he was a cunt. He was a total cunt. We'll get into it. Now, the son was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, and he went to the Senate and was fucking throwing all the shade at Servius Tullius. He said, the son of a slave should not be king, and he was named by a fucking dishwasher, and not by the Senate or the people of Rome. He gave plebs more rights, and generally just pissed off a lot of the people in the Senate, and that he shouldn't have been king in the first place. When Servius heard about this, he went to the Senate and to try to defend his case, and Tarquin pushed him down the steps and had his men beat him to death. When Tarquin's wife arrived on the scene, she quickly fled, but not before taking her chariot and running over her father a few times for good measure. Daddy issues are eternal.
I'm a bitch, I'm a lover.
Now, Tarquin was king, and the man did not beat the tyrant accusations. He said evidence is gay, and he broke treaties and treated generally everybody like shit, especially the plebes. He did also build a lot of stuff, which this is the Romans. They're known for two things, fighting and building shit. During the siege of Ardea, Tarquin's son Sextus had his eyes on his cousin's dishwasher named Lucretia. One night, he sneaked into her tent to make his intentions known. She refused. He said that if she didn't, he would kill her, and then tell her husband, Callantius, that she slept with a slave. Lucretia didn't want to bring shame upon her husband or his house, so she gave in to what he wanted. But she would later go to her father and her husband and explain about the rape. Afterward, she took a sword and stabbed herself out of shame. So her father Spurius, with his two commanders and friends, Brutus and Publius Valerius,
Good job.
held a meeting with the plebs and basically asked them to revolt against the tyranny of the Tarquins, which they, already being pissed off at him, readily agreed to. This revolt exiled Sextus, where he was later assassinated. Good fucking riddance. Tarquin himself fled to the city, to the rival of Rome at the time, Veii, which he was trying to convince them to attack Rome and put him back on the throne. But while he was doing that, Brutus, Valerius, Callantius, Spurius, and the people and plebs of Rome established a new republic, hell-bent and vowing to never have a king again. The year was 509 BC, and this new republic had to figure itself out. It had offices to fill without a king. In place of a king, the republic now elected 2 consuls every year to make executive decisions. That way, one could check the other, and if both were shit, the people of Rome would only have to wait 1 year until election season, and then crucify the shitty cunty consuls. Now, below consuls were praetors, who were basically judges of the law. Below them were quaestors, who acted as assistants to the consuls and managed the money and treasury of the city. Censors were in charge of conducting censuses and assessing property and wealth of its citizens. Aediles are civil servants that were in charge of the grain supply and logistics of both the legions and the cities that they occupied. And finally, the Pontifex Maximus, who was the end-all be-all of all religious matters, the proto-pope, if you will. So the goal for any patrician worth his salt was to climb this ladder of offices, which was called the cursus honorum. Now we have that all the way. Let's see how our new republic started. The first consuls were Brutus and Callantius from the expulsion of the Tarquins. Now, the people of Rome didn't really care that a relative of the Tarquins became one of the first consuls. So Callantius stepped down and Publius Valerius took his place and acted as consul. He did great things for the people of Rome, earning the title Publicola, which meant man of the people or friend of the people, for all his good works towards both patricians and plebs. The plebs of the city were the first to conduct a strike when they wanted more rights. So they emptied the city and left Rome completely defenseless and not manufacturing its wealth. So the patricians agreed to their demands. One of the things the plebs wanted was a voice in government to kind of sidestep the patricians in case of tyranny. And they also wanted a body of laws that everyone could read and adhere to. So the patricians made the office of tribune, which was a form of power to veto certain legislation coming out of the Senate. And they created the 12 tables, which was a body of laws posted in the forum for all to see and adhere to. So we can't talk about the early republic without talking about a man named Cincinnatus. This fucking guy was a noble patrician who lost all his money trying to pay for his debts that his son racked up, or that his son skipped town to not pay. And so he was forced to live on a farm outside of the city. When the consuls of the year 462 BC fumbled a campaign and ended up being surrounded by the enemy army, the Senate were in complete disarray, and they decided to elect Cincinnatus as dictator. Now, dictator was a temporary office that basically cut all the red tape of Republican laws and gave one man the power to see them through a crisis. So the dictator would call the shots, no ifs, ands, or but my rights. So Cincinnatus drafted a legion, saved the consular army, came back home, resigning the dictatorship, and went back to his farm and all his shussy.
Out of the way, you!
Decades later, he was made dictator again when the plebs started rioting. Once it was finished, and he brought order back to the city, he did the same thing again. He relinquished his dictatorship and went back to the farm. The sheep were wet with anticipation. In 396 BC, the Romans finally took the city of Veii, which was the rival at the time, through the effort of a dictator named Marcus Furius Camillus. So the Romans had three ways of approaching a conquered people. If you weren't hostile and even supported the Romans, you were granted full citizenship. If you resisted a bit and then surrendered, you were given trade rights and maybe minimal voting in terms of citizenships. If you made it tough for the Romans and you lived through it, well, you became farming tools. And you already know what happened to the people of Veii.
Master got me working.
Not long after the campaign, Camillus was brought up by the quaestors on embezzlement charges for the campaign. He was convicted and exiled out of Rome, just in time for the Gauls to invade Italy. To understand the Gauls, there's a famous quote about the barbarians. The ancient ancestors of the French, the Gauls, were aligned in destiny with their descendants, for both became the catalyst for bigger conflicts and short-lived expansions into greater Europe. Both the French and the Gauls' impact on the civilizations around them is without question. However, their own place in the grand tapestry of history shows them both to be completely fucking useless. So while the only competent general, Camillus, was off in exile, the Gauls besieged and sacked most of the Eternal City under their chieftain Brennus. While they couldn't take the Capitoline Hill, Their rampage through Rome was remembered by the Romans till about 476 AD.
I suppose you think that was terribly clever.
To get the Gauls to leave, the Senate paid a hefty amount of silver and gold to them. They did later notice the scales used to weigh out the plunder was tipped favorably by Brennus by his sword. When the Romans bitched about this, Brennus famously said, "Vae victis," which translates to,
Three little words. Get fucked, nerd. A few years later.
So Rome started thinking about total control of Italy and said, "Hold my beer." The real competition was a group of hillbillies called the Samnites that lived in the Apennine Mountains. After incorporating the cities and territories of Capua and Neapolis, plus slapping down the Latin League for the last time, the Romans thought it was time to take the fight to Samnia, or so they thought. In 321 BC, two consuls were on a campaign in Samnia when they got word of an allied city being besieged by the Samnites. To come to their rescue quickly, they had to pass through this narrow pass in the mountains called the Caudine Forks. Little did they know that this was a trap, and they found their armies surrounded. Now, the consuls chose shame over death for their legions, and had the legions pass under the yoke with their heads pointed down the entire way back to Rome. A brilliant thing about the Romans is their ability to adapt to overcome any kind of enemy. See, from the time of the Tarquins, the Romans fought in the widely used Greek phalanx formation.
It was the style at the time. No!
But the phalanx was only good in flat terrain in a headlong battle. Fighting the Samnites in a mountainous terrain that they were home to meant they were constantly being flanked. So the Romans changed strategies and reorganized the legions into the manipule system. Now, the manipule system was 120 men lined up in 3 checkerboard fashion lines. The first line was made up of noobs eager to earn some glory, and they were called the Hastati. The second line were veterans egging on the noobs to do the 360 no-scope. These were called the Principes. Now, the third line was made of the best, the sweatiest of the sweaty, called the Triarii. They were only used when the situation was absolutely dire, or when they needed XP. But when they were used, they definitely locked the fuck in. And this is how the Romans dominated the hillbilly Samnites. Rome was now the master of central Italy, and it had its sights on the southern tip called Magna Graecia, which was home to gay boy Greek colonists. These Greek twinks called in help to fight against the Romans to the king of Epirus named Pyrrhus. He had a very strong army. He was a seasoned veteran of 100 battles, and he used war elephants a lot as he beat the Romans 3 different times. But each time, the Romans would come back with a fresh legion and slightly scary smiles on their faces. This is the meat grinder strategy that Rome would adopt to defeat certain enemies, which was adopted by the Soviets during the First and Second War. Anything for utopia, eh, comrade? Pyrrhus would famously say, "One more victory and we're done for." And Pyrrhic victory is a phrase that was coined after this that basically meant you won every battle, but you lost the war. Looking at you, Robb Stark.
The Lannisters send their regards.
So he later rage quit into Sicily and left the Romans to take Magna Graecia. Pyrrhus also famously quoted as saying, "What a battlefield we are leaving for Rome and Carthage."
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
The next episode will delve into the 2 superpowers duking it out for dominion over the Mediterranean. So until then, raise hail, praise Dale, and Carthago delante est.